Swati Patwardhan, and I'm the Regulatory Project Manager in the Division of Anesthesia, Analgesia, and Addiction Product. And I have a hard job today to keep you all awake after the lunch. So let's see how it goes. The topic is components of new drug application and biologics license application. It's in two parts. I'm going to talk more about the content and format of the application, what should be in the application, and my colleague Louis, she is going to talk more about the review process of the application. So as far as the learning objectives are concerned, we will look at the application approval pathways, various through which application can get approval. We will look into the content and format of an application. And lastly, but not the least, we will look into the forms and documentations that are required. And we are going to focus on module 1 of the CTD module and look at some examples and best practices. So just before we go into what should be an application, I thought maybe we can look into why of an application. Since the beginning of human civilization, humans wanted to know what is in their food and is it safe. But as far as the modern history is concerned, it was in 1906 that the Food and Drug Act was passed. And that it prohibited the misbranded and adulterated food and drugs from the market. In 1938, they included the cosmetics and medical devices as well. But until 1962, always the focus was on the safety. And it was through the 1962 amendment, the drug manufacturer were required to show that not only the drug is safe, but it was effective as well. In 1984, through the Hatch-Waxman Amendment, there was a new approval pathway established for generic drugs, or known as abbreviated new drug application, ANDA, and that it helped with the competition and also helped bringing down the prices. In 1992, the Prescription Drug User Fee Act was created, and that allowed the FDA to collect user fees for certain human drug and biological application. That increased the transparency as well as the efficiency of the review process and also helped with the timeline. And as you know now, the PDUFA must reauthorized every 5 years, and currently we are in PDUFA 6. Looking at the regulatory pathways for the NDAs, it is 505B1, B2. Now 505J is actually not a new drug application, it's an abbreviated drug application, but I have included it here. And BLA, biological license applications, they are licensed under Public Health Service Act under section 351A, whereas biosimilars are under 351K. Because the biological license application, they are basically drug, therefore they are also regulated under FD&C Act. So let's look into the 505B1 application. 505B1 applications are also known as standalone application because it contains the full reports of safety and effectiveness that is required to support the approval. And for that, the applicant is required to conduct all the studies that support the approval, or they own those studies or has a right of reference to all the information. Contrary, 505B2 application also require that they contain the full reports to support the safety and effectiveness. However, not all the information that is required in the application comes through the applicant. They may or they don't have all the right of reference for those applications, and they typically rely upon the previous findings of safety and effectiveness that is already from the approved drug, and those approved drugs should be listed in the Orange Book. They can also rely on the published literature, or they can also rely on the final OTC monograph. Versus when we talk of 505J application, also known as abbreviated new drug application, abbreviated because they do not need to have non-clinical or clinical data in their applications. However, they have to show that the proposed product is equivalent to the previously approved drug product, and again, it should be the approved drug product that is listed in the Orange Book. And it should be a reference listed drug product identified in the Orange Book. And then it is required that it is bioequivalent to the RLD. Versus when we look at the biologics approval pathway, it has to not only for the BLA, the product has to show the safety and efficacy, rather they call it as a potency, but the manufacturing process and the manufacturing facilities should meet the requirement to ensure that there is a continued safety, purity, and potency of the product. What is unusual of BLA, which is not in NDA, is once the BLA is approved, there is an issuance of license to manufacture and put the product in interstate commerce. And I have just included the list of what therapeutic biological product the CDER regulates. Now, when we talk of biosimilars, biosimilars should be highly similar to the reference product, and they should also be interchangeable. And I say interchangeable, which means that it is expected that when it is given to the patients, it should produce the same or similar results to the reference product. Talking a little bit about the OTC drugs, over-the-counter drug. Over-the-counter drug can get approval through two. They can submit an NDA, or they can approve through final OTC monograph. If they are approved through final OTC monograph, they do not need to submit an NDA application, which means they don't have to submit a user fee as well. And little bit about medical gas application. Now, medical gas application, they are for the use of humans and animals. And so far, FDA has approved 7 types of medical gases, but they are not considered as PDUFA applications, and they don't go through PDUFA timelines. Once the applicant submits the application, within 60 days, if the agency does not get back to the applicant, it is deemed approved. And all the drugs, means NDA products and also the BLA products managed by CDER, are usually managed by Office of New Drug. But medical gas applications are the ones that are managed by Office of Process and Regulatory Operations, OPRO, and the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, also known as OPQ. So just quickly going the differences of the NDA and versus BLA. So when we talk of NDA drug product, we say that the product should be safe and effective. But for BLA, it says that it should be safe, pure, potent. And more importantly, the facilities need to meet the standards to be safe, pure, and potent. We looked at the approval pathways, various between NDA and BLA. And also I mentioned that a license number is assigned to a BLA once approved. Another difference is that for NDA, all the listed drugs, for NDA as well as ANDA, all the listed drugs are published in the Orange Book, versus for BLA and biosimilars, they are in the Purple Book. And lastly, when you decide to withdraw, when you decide to withdraw an NDA, means the withdrawal is effective on the date the Federal Register notice is published. In fact, it says that this is the effective date of withdrawal in the Federal Register notice. However, for the BLA, once you request to the agency that you want to withdraw a BLA and a revocation letter is issued, the BLA is considered withdrawn. So let's switch a little bit of the gear and look into the content and format of these applications based on these CFR and associated guidances. We all know this, we must have seen number of times, the common technical document triangle. This is basically, it gives a schematic on how a application should be arranged. So across the globe, I should say, various regulatory agencies, they try to have the application in the same format, whether it's in EU or whether it's in United States or Canada. However, the module 1 is, it's not part of the CTD, and that each regulatory agency has a little bit of discretion. So for this particular session, we are going to focus on module 1, and I'm going to share with you some of the things that we look when an application comes in, what we are looking for. And when I am training or I'm sharing with the newly hired project managers, the tips that I give or we give, I'm going to share those same with you. Now, if you look on the focus on module 1 aspect, you will see there are different forms and also the certifications. One thing, if you are well conversant with module 1, one thing you will see that there is not environmental analysis, nor there is a REMS bullet included. One of the thing is environmental analysis we do look at, but because it's part of the quality, we just make sure as a regulatory project manager, sorry about that, that it is there. And as far as the REMS or risk evaluation and mitigation strategy, that is a section on itself, and it's so we look at it that if it is there, and naturally you will be as an applicant, it will be that during the IND phase or pre-development phase, you will know and discuss with the agency if REMS will apply to your product, and you will have to prepare the risk management plan. So let's look at the first, the 356H. Now this 356H, it is what we call it as, it is a very important form. You have to submit with your cover letter when you submit an original application. However, during each and every submission, you have to submit 356H. It's not, it is every time you submit an application, you are required, amendment, you are required to submit 356H. And it has almost 38 lines. So it is an information-packed certificate. And therefore, there is so much of information. When we look at the 356H, we get a very good idea on what overall this application is about. It like tells us a story of what this application is about. So therefore, we have seen that many errors or things are missed in this form. So I just wanted to give a few items there where we have seen there are more errors or more missing items. One thing I wanted to remind you is line 6. If the applicant is a non-US applicant, then an authorized US agent has to be identified. And even for the US applicant, all the information, especially the telephone number, secure email address, no 1-800 please. Because during our first 60-day filing period, we want to realize if there is any clarification needed, we can pick up the phone and can talk to you, clarify. And so therefore, a working number or a direct number helps, and also the secure email. I think so my colleague Kelly, she mentioned about that. Another thing I want to talk about is a line 20. Here also we see things that are missed. So what line 20 says is, for an 505(b)(2), I'm going to focus on 505(b)(2), identify the listed drug product that are the basis for the submission. So if you have a 505(b)(2) product, and as we saw in earlier slide, you don't have all the information or all the studies, you have not conducted all the studies yourself to support the safety and efficacy. So you are trying to rely on either a published literature or you are trying to rely on other listed drugs. So you have to identify all those listed drugs into line 20. And how you will know that? You look at your labeling. Your annotated labeling should have all the drugs that you are trying to rely upon. Or if you are submitting published literature as your reliance, then you should, and if the published literature has listed drugs, then those should be included in line 20. Now, what is new in Form 356H? And this is one of the reasons you should always use updated forms. In August 2018, the form was updated, and then there was this new field was included for line 15B. Previously, it was just the proposed indication for use, and it was split into two. And now we have included the SNOMED CT indication disease term, and it stands for Systematized Nomenclature of Medicine Clinical Term. And this is necessary for coding the study data indication and also for additional tracking purposes. Now, everybody does not know this disease term, so if you look at the 356H instruction, they have provided this link and also have included here. If you use that link and you go through CDER, then you can enter whatever your proposed indication for use is, and it will spell out whatever the disease term it is. And it is required that for each indication for use, you should have the term. So therefore, if you see here, you will see that there is a continuation page there. Another thing, I think so somebody already mentioned about this, that now line 24, we have included, if there is a combination product, we want to identify it early and alert appropriate center. So therefore, we have included a line here which says if there is a combination product, what type of combination product is, and if you have already received a designation number, then you should include here. So moving on to Form 3397. Now this is a checklist, so I will go over all these forms and whatever little tips that I feel will be useful, I want to share those with you. Form 3397, it's an online form, so you have to populate it online. But I want to also share with you the latest user fee for the current financial year, depending on whether you require a clinical data or not. The user fee changes. Another thing with the PDUFA 6, up till PDUFA 5, when you submit a supplement, especially an efficacy supplement, you were required to submit user fee. But with PDUFA 6 now, you're not required. It's a one single fee is collected. However, if there are any questions about user fee, please contact this number or email. Clinical trial certification form, Form 3674. So if you have conducted clinical trials and you have registered at clinicaltrials.gov, then you will be assigned a clinical trial number, a national clinical trial number, and that should be included in Form 3674. So it helps the review division to correlate with any medical reviews or any other alerts. And also that if the NCT number is included in the labeling if applicable. Now, not all clinical trials, not all applications are registered under clinical trial. However, you have to submit Form 3674 even if you haven't conducted any clinical trial, you have done some bioequivalence studies, or you are just submitting published literature as a necessary for approval for your 505(b)(2) application. Still, you have to submit the Form 3674. Debarment certification, as the name suggests, that the applicant is required to submit that they did not and will not use any in any capacity the services of any debarred persons. So this is a one-time certification. You don't need to update it because it covers did not and will not. So once you submit, that is enough, means even for your next future supplements or any, you do not need to submit an updated certification. One thing I want to point out is that there is a very specific language into the CFR, and there is no wiggle room to that. And from my personal experience, I would say that I have received few debarment certification from applicants, and they try to use some different language, and unfortunately we cannot accept, and therefore we have to say, can you please resubmit it? So the conditional language is not accepted. And another aspect is that if there is a foreign applicant, then the US agent as well as the foreign applicant both should be signing this certification. Now, the financial certification and disclosure form, these are basically as the name suggests, if there is any financial arrangement between the clinical investigator and the applicant, then, and if that is going to affect the reliability of the data that is necessary to support the approval, then you need to disclose that through these forms. And there are two types of forms. So if there is no financial arrangement, then you can submit form 3454. But if there is a disclosure, then you submit a 3455. Now, even if there is a bioequivalence studies that you have conducted, you still should submit these forms. And again, this should be signed by the applicant. If there is a agent, authorized representative, then they have to make sure that they are authorized to sign this on applicant's behalf. And I've also included a link where you can access these forms or related guidances. Patent and exclusivity, this is another area where we have seen some confusion and there is some back and forth that happens. Now, FDA does not regulate patent laws. Patents are issued by US Patent and Trademark Office, but FDA does grant exclusivity. And if you as an applicant, if you are trying to rely on a listed drug, then you have to ensure and you have to submit a certification, what we call it as a patent certification, with your NDA if there is a appropriate patent certification, whether there is a pending patent or there is a expired patent. And there are 4 types of patent certification: type 1, type 2, type 3, type 4. Depending on what is, if there is a pending patent, then it's paragraph 4 certification. If there is a patent is going to expire, you submit patent, sorry, I'm going backwards here. Patent 3 certification, and then if it is the patent has already expired, then you will submit patent 2, and if there is no patent submitted, then you'll submit patent 1 certification. And if there is a patent, then you have to include the patent number as well. Now, this is as far as if you are trying to rely on a listed drug, you have to make sure that the patent information is included. However, if you are an applicant and you have a patent in your name as an NDA holder, then you need to submit what we call it as a form 3542A. And this form is required when you submit your NDA, means your what we call it as for during your pending NDA. And there you will let us know that you have already a patent for a drug product or drug substance or method of use, whatever that may be. And once your application is approved, then you will submit what we call it as a form 3542. And what it does is it transfers that information from the NDA to the Orange Book. So the Orange Book appropriately lists those patents for that application. So whoever is thinking of referencing your approved product, they have that updated patent information. And though the information is transferred in the Orange Book, however, you have to submit that information to the NDA. Moving forward with exclusivity, as I said, that FDA does grant exclusivity, though the division does not. The exclusivity is granted by the exclusivity board with the help of Orange Book. And the funny part of exclusivity is you don't have to request it. If your product is eligible for exclusivity, even if you don't request, you will be granted an exclusivity. And here are the different type of exclusivity. If it is your BLA application, you get a 12 years of exclusivity versus orphan drug 7 years. I want to focus on the last bullet, the pediatric exclusivity. It's a 6 months exclusivity, and it is attached to. It's not a standalone exclusivity. It can only be granted if you have a pending exclusivity. And I have an incident with one of my colleagues where the applicant submitted the application. They did. Now for pediatric exclusivity, you have to conduct studies, what we call it as studies under PWR, or Pediatric Return Request. And because they are not required, you work with the division and then you agree what type of studies you will be doing, and you have to complete those studies and submit the reports. And once though the studies are successful and during the review it's yes, you are fulfilling that, then you receive the pediatric exclusivity. However, as I said, you have to, if the timeline is off, then and your exclusivity is expiring, there will be a change in labeling. However, you may not get that exclusivity. Moving on with the references, two type of references. We mentioned before into a little bit into 505(b)(1), (b)(2) that if you own your data, you can always cross references. Versus if you don't own the data, you can have a right of reference. Example as for the drug master file, because all the information for drug substance is in drug master file, and you don't have a right to look at it, but you can give a authorization to the FDA to review that information in the drug master file. Lastly, we are coming to an end, hopefully. This is a important one, another area where there could be a refuse to file issue. I spoke a little bit about the pediatric exclusivity, where under PWR, you do these studies on your own. It is not required. The regulation cannot require you to do the studies. However, if your application is for new active ingredient, new indication, new dosage form, new dosing regimen, or new route of administration, then you are required to conduct a pediatric assessment to ensure that the drug is also safe and effective into the pediatric subpopulation. And it is that what you do is you start at the developmental phase prior to submission of NDA, and you discuss with the agency, discuss with the division how you are going to fulfill these requirements by submitting what we call it as a pediatric study plan, where you can say, okay, I'm going to, from this age to this age, we are going to conduct the studies later on or along with the NDA, whatever that is. And the agency should be agreeing with it, and what we call it as an agreed PSP or agreed pediatric study plan. And if the agreed PSP is not agreed upon at the time of the NDA, it can be a refuse to file situation. And accordingly, you will request for deferral or waiver. When I say deferral, which means that you say that, okay, we will conduct the studies after we get the NDA approval, because we have to either formulate an age appropriate formulation for the young age group from 0 to 2, or you would say that we are not ready because the drug is ready for approval, we need additional safety data, therefore we are requesting deferral. Or you can request a waiver depending on what your indication is. For for example, at times that some disease does not happen in children. So naturally, like old age dementia or osteoarthritis, then you can request a waiver. Lastly, labeling. There is going to be multiple session on labeling, but I just wanted to give you some quick pointers to the labeling. When you submit an NDA, along with the Word format, you also, it is required that the labeling is submitted in the SPL or structured product labeling format under as an XML file. You should also submit annotated labeling for if you have conducted studies, then those studies you will refer it into the labeling as a supporting that here is the information. And based on that, this is the change that we are proposing. Or if you are submitting 505(b)(2) application, then naturally you will say that, okay, this is the listed drug that we are relying upon, and based upon which you are making these changes into your proposed labeling. Another thing is about the specific requirement for prescribing information, or what we call it as a SERP. This is another area where we have seen when we look at this checklist, so far means at least I can speak about myself that I have not seen an application where there is a couple of items missing based on the SERP checklist. So it's a good idea, means we definitely granted that we do not start the labeling discussion until unless in the later part of the review cycle. However, if you can take care of these formatting issues upfront, it is better than that time we can only focus on the meat aspect of the labeling. Another thing is I want to start in 2015 with the finalizing of what we call it as a pregnancy and lactation labeling rule. The labeling is required to be submitted into what we call it as a PLLR format, and you should also submit the literature review supporting PLLR. So just a quick general consideration, all the forms should be submitted required, signed by appropriate signatories. It should be, submission should be in English and legible. These includes any supporting literature that you have submitted for approval. They should be in English, and make sure all the hyperlinks are navigable. And as I am required to submit a challenge question, I see only 4 minutes have remained, so we will quickly go over them. Company A submits an application for immediate release oral tablet to the Division of Magic Drug, referencing published literature necessary for approval and cross-referencing safety data from the previously approved wonder drug. As company owns these data, should they submit a 505(b)(1), 505(b)(2), 505(j), or none of the above? B. The correct answer is B. Means even if the last line is a little misleading, it says company owns these data, but the real catch point is here, which says, I don't know, can I? What it says is referencing published literature necessary for approval. So that shows that it's a 505(b)(2) application. And then I have some references included, and we have 3 minutes, 2 seconds for questions.
And now, I don't think Swati timed it because she doesn't want to answer questions. Because I know for a fact that at the end of the day, she's going to be coming back here. We're going to have those one-on-one question opportunities. But I know we did get a bunch of online questions. So rather than having you guys line up here, you'll be able to get together with Swati a little bit later to ask your questions. Let's take an online question, please, Ray.
Thank you, Jeff. Does the FDA accept literature from European studies in support of a U.S. 505(b)(2) application?
I don't want to misspeak, but if there is a listed drug that is European approved and it's not FDA approved, then we cannot rely on that. But I will confirm and I'll make sure that this information is correct.
All right, next online question, please.
And this is dealing with debarment. Do we need to submit a debarment certification for an OTC application?
For OTC application, if it is submitted through NDA approval pathway, then yes. But if it is through a final OTC monograph, then it is an NDA is not required, so therefore you don't need to submit a debarment certification.
Okay, keep them coming.
This deals with annual reports. For annual reports, should both a 356H and a 2252 form be submitted?
Yes, that is correct. You have to submit Form 356H, annual report, supplements, and then for annual report, you have to also require to submit Form 2252.
Okay, another one?
While submitting the 356H for an amendment or a supplement, is it mandatory to list all facilities listed in the original submission, or can we only list the additional facilities if applicable?
So if when at the time of the original submission, you are required to include all the facilities on Form 356H. However, when you submit a new supplement, and if you are trying to change, you are trying to add a new facility or new testing site, then you should only include that particular facilities in your Form 356H.
All righty, and that is all the time we have for questions there. Please help me thank